is an Ancient Faith Radio public service announcement. The Mental Health Task Force of the Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops has recently launched two mental health initiatives, a national directory of Orthodox mental health professionals and an Orthodox mental health needs assessment that are available at www.assemblyofbishops.org/mental-health. The Directory of Orthodox Mental Health Professionals features licensed Orthodox Christian clinicians across the U.S. who are available to serve as resources to those seeking mental health care, substance abuse care, and/or professional consultation. While the Orthodox Mental Health Needs Assessment is an anonymous survey for all Orthodox jurisdictions, clergy, and lay people across the U.S. The aggregate data from this survey will help the task force better understand and address the mental health needs of Orthodox faithful through the development of ministry resources. Once again, that web address is www.assemblyofbishops.org/mental-health. This has been a public service announcement of Ancient Faith Radio.
This is Ancient Faith Today with Father Tom Soroka, a weekly live call-in show addressing the issues of our day from a distinctly Orthodox perspective. You can join the conversation by calling in at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Father Tom is the priest at St. Nicholas Orthodox Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and welcomes guests from across the globe to discuss important topics of interest. Here's Father Tom.
Welcome to Ancient Faith Today. This is Father Tom Soroka, and I'm so glad that you're with us this evening. We'll be taking your calls in a bit at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. Trudy will be answering your calls tonight, so please make sure to turn the show volume off before you come on air. To participate online, we encourage you to go either to the AFR Facebook page at facebook.com/ancientfaithradio and place a question there in the thread for tonight's show, where it is now being live simulcast. You can also go to facebook.com/ancientfaithtoday and place a question there in the thread for tonight's show. You can also send us an email at aft@ancientfaith.com. So let's get started. Marriage has been the foundational relationship of civilized society for thousands of years because marriages produce families. But marriage as an institution within modern Western society has had a rough time for the last few decades. From the rising divorce rate to the wholesale redefinition of marriage, what we mean when we say the word marriage should no longer be assumed. Marriage as a concept isn't uniquely Christian, but there is a uniqueness about Christian marriage. The idea of the sacramental understanding of marriage within the Orthodox faith is the basis of what we believe about marriage. But why is marriage a sacrament? And what is the grace that a married couple receives in it? How can husbands and wives become sanctified, even deified, within marriage? That's our subject for tonight. Here to discuss this important topic is Dr. David Ford. Dr. Ford is the professor of church history at St. Tikhon's Orthodox Theological Seminary in South Canaan, Pennsylvania. He holds degrees from Colgate University, Oral Roberts University, and his PhD is from Drew University. He has published 7 books, including Marriage as a Path to Holiness, Lives of Married Saints, co-authored with his wife, Dr. Mary Ford, and Women and Men in the Early Church, The Vision of St. John Chrysostom. He's also one of the editors of Glory and Honor, Orthodox Christian Resources on Marriage, published by St. Vladimir's Seminary Press. And with that, Dr. David Ford, welcome to Ancient Faith Today.
Thank you, Father. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here too, and we get to say also to one another one last time, Christ is risen.
Indeed, he is risen.
Yeah, we're coming up on the leave taking of the feast, and it's such beautiful words. We will miss saying it until next year. This year was very special.
Yes.
So, Dr. Ford, thank you for being with us tonight.
Sure.
You and I have been conversing for the last few days, and we agree that this is a very, very important topic, and we're taking on maybe two very important topics here. One is this idea of marriage, and we're going to talk about that. But your approach to the whole subject tonight is really about deification through marriage. So why don't we start there, and let's talk about deification first. We know that this is a foundational Orthodox principle. It's something that we hear a lot about, but we have non-Orthodox listeners. We also have people that may not really understand what is deification, or sometimes we call it theosis. So help us to understand, what's the Orthodox understanding of deification or theosis?
Okay, yes. Well, we usually start with the famous expression by St. Athanasius the Great from the 4th century: God became man so that man can become God or God-like. Mm-hmm. Or to expand this, God became man so that man, by grace, can become all that God is by nature. Man remains human, created, but becomes filled with the uncreated energies of God. This is how St. Gregory Palamas explains it. And this makes man fully human, all that he is created to be. And I'd like to... Yes, please.
Dr. Ford, before
Yes.
you go on, I want to expand on that a little bit, because
Sure.
you say this seems to be a dichotomy. On the one hand, you're saying that a man can become God by grace, and maybe we need to unpack that a little bit. But then you're saying it's what it is to be fully human. So how can one be fully human and then also God by grace? What does that mean?
Yes, it's what we're all called to be. It's why we are created, to have such an intimate communion with Christ our Lord, that we become like him. We share his mind, in a sense. Acquiring the mind of Christ is our calling. And this is what makes us all that he originally created us to be, in such intense communion with him.
Amazing. So I'm sorry I interrupted you before, and you were talking about St. Gregory Palamas. Can you please go on with that?
Well, he is the one who talks especially about our participation in the uncreated energies of God. It's through his energies that he makes himself accessible to us, whereas in his essence, he remains totally beyond us. So this is a wonderful distinction, the essence and energies distinction, that helps us understand how God himself can share his very life with human beings, which is his greatest desire for us.
I see. So, obviously we're talking about marriage, and you're bringing up the idea of theosis. So, as all of us who are married know that this is, it has its challenges, right? Being
Sure.
married is a wonderful blessing,
Yes.
but also there are challenges living with someone and learning how to navigate that relationship,
Yes.
having children, et cetera, should God bless us with children.
Yes.
So it seems like a very odd vehicle for deification, when we think of someone, like a monk who is alone somewhere on a mountain. That's what we think of as deification. But, to be married and to be in a relationship and to have a family How can being married help us on the path to deification?
Well, I think first of all, we would say that since marriage is the most common path that people follow, that it's been created by our Lord himself, instituted by him, then surely it must be a path to deification, which is the goal for all of us. So that's our bottom line. It is our calling, whether we are single or married or monastics. And in the married relationship especially, we have the opportunity to serve another human being, probably to the greatest extent possible. And in this serving another, we grow closer to Christ. There is marital asceticism. We often think of asceticism as just for the monks, but it's an important part of marriage when we lay down our lives, our desires, and think of our spouse first, to serve our spouse's desires and needs. This is a dying to ourselves, and this is all part of the process that brings us closer to the Lord. Yes. Go ahead.
Is this the kind of martyrdom in a way that is referred to in the wedding service?
Yes, absolutely. That's why we sing honoring the martyrs in the wedding service.
I see.
And the crowns with which we're crowned in the wedding service are also considered to be crowns of martyrdom, laying down our lives for our spouse.
Amazing. Now let's remind before we go on, let's remind our listeners that they can call in with questions. I know that obviously there are many married people, and we have a noted author here and a teacher writing books about marriage and understanding the church's history with marriage and the teaching of marriage. So we want to encourage you to call in 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. Also, if you'd like to, you can post a question or a comment within the Facebook pages there. Also, you can go to the stories on Instagram right now that are listed there, and you can post a question on any of the topics that are going through the stories for the live shows. That's a great way to get questions to the hosts of those live shows. Also, you're able to go to ancientfaith.com/live, click on any one of the shows, including of course, Ancient Faith Today, and there's a place where you can click to record a question and have that question played on the show. So we encourage our listeners to call in, give your comments, give your thoughts, and give your questions. So, Dr. Ford, how else does being married help us on the path of deification?
Yes, as well as such an opportunity for self-sacrificial love, we have the opportunity to be greatly assisted by the one we're closest to on the path of salvation, on the path of theosis. And I'd like to quote St. Gregory the theologian from the 4th century about this. He says, "In our living together, we are each other's hands, ears, and feet. Marriage redoubles our strength. A common concern makes trials bearable. Common joys are all the happier. And accord makes riches more pleasant. Harmony is even more delightful than riches for those without wealth." And he also says, "Marriage is the key of moderation and the harmony of the desires, the seal of a deep friendship, the unique drink from a fountain enclosed, inaccessible to those outside. United in the flesh, one in spirit, they urge each other on by the goad of their mutual love. For marriage does not take us away from God, but brings us all the closer to him. For it is God himself who draws us to it. And as we've said, he's the inventor of marriage, the originator of it, and he gives us guidelines for how to live it.
What a beautiful vision that St. Gregory gives of marriage, because you can hear in his words this idea of somehow complementing one another, of softening one another, of helping one another. This is really beautiful because, again, as I said at the beginning of the show, unfortunately, I think marriage is receiving a kind of a bad rap in society today for a variety of reasons. And it seems to me, Dr. Ford, that the church is exalting marriage and lifting it up as sort of this essential way for those who are called to it, of course, to have a life in Christ.
Absolutely, yes. It's the closest possible relationship in all of human existence. And as we've said, it involves self-sacrificial giving of each other, of each one to the other, just as Christ sacrificed himself for all humanity. I love how St. John Chrysostom says, there is never such intimacy between a man and a man as there is between husband and wife, if they are united as they ought to be. And then I also would love to share from Father Alexander Elkaninov, the diary of a Russian priest. He says, marriage, fleshly love, is a very great sacrament and mystery. Through it is accomplished the most real and at the same time the most mysterious of all possible forms of human relationship. And qualitatively, marriage enables us to pass beyond all the normal rules of human relationship and to enter a region of the miraculous. So we do indeed exalt marriage very highly in our church. It's a great vision.
It really is. And St. John's words were very striking there, because he talked about this sort of uniqueness of marriage, which I think that uniqueness of marriage is missing today. You know, the idea that somehow people, if I want to be with somebody, if I want to be alone, then I don't have to marry. But St. John is really holding this up to say that there is something very unique and very special. It's not simply two people living together.
Oh, it's much more than that. To be united in the church, in the sacrament of holy matrimony, where God himself is the one who unites the bride and the groom. It's so much more, yes, than just two people living together. And you have this mutual commitment, the love of the two that is then kind of sealed, and grace is infused into that love and making the possibility for tremendous intimacy possible, mutual trust, and
Wonderful.
so on between husband
Wonderful.
and wife. Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Yes.
1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. We'd love to hear from you tonight if you have any questions about marriage or about the wedding ceremony. I know that, Dr. Ford, our Orthodox wedding ceremony is quite unique in this sense. It's different than just two people standing before a judge and promising to, be legally bound to one another. What would you say? I just want to maybe interrupt some of our questions here. What would you say is unique about the Orthodox wedding ceremony itself in comparison to, let's say, the traditional understanding of a Western person? You know, they go before a minister and they say vows. They go before a judge and they say vows. Why is the Orthodox ceremony so very, very different, where you don't have vows, but you have crowns and you go around the table? And
Yes.
why is it so different? Why is the Orthodox service, it seems, so unique and so very different from the Western understanding of a wedding ceremony?
Well, I think it's because it is so Christ-centered. He is the one who does the uniting. It's interesting. In the Western Christian tradition, in the wedding service, those words, "until death do us part," that phrase only comes into the Western wedding service around the year 1400. So that's another real big difference, I think.
Fascinating.
Besides the fact that we don't have the vows, that it's Christ Himself who is the center. But yes, we don't have those kind of sad words, I think, "just till death do us part." I mean,
Right.
We understand marriage meant to be forever. And so we are building not just a life together in this world, but we're preparing to be united, as St. John Chrysostom says, with even greater bliss, with even greater
Right.
pleasure in the next life.
Right, exactly. That union, as you've alluded to before, the union between the man and the wife is that sort of symbol or foretaste of the union between Christ and the church, that there's sort of an intimacy there that
Yes.
that is quite unique in all understandings of communion and this union between God and man.
Yes, and it's a tremendous kind of additional uniqueness about marriage. Every Christian marriage has the tremendous honor and awesome responsibility to symbolize Christ's love. Christ as the bridegroom, symbolizing His love for His bride, the church. And here we can quote St. Paul, Ephesians 5, "The husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is head of the church. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave Himself for her. This is a great mystery," St. Paul says, "but I speak concerning Christ and the church." And this imagery is throughout the Bible. It's the premier imagery used in the scriptures, used by God Himself, right? As He describes or refers to His relationship with His people. First in the Old Testament, His relationship with Israel. And then, of course, in the New Testament with Christ, His love for His church, His bride. And He refers to Himself as the bridegroom. So it's tremendously important.
I love it.
This should raise, we who are married, for us, it should raise our sights, so to speak,
Right.
and just touch us deeply that we are involved with something that is so monumental in its scope, in its meaning.
I love your elevated language that you bring to the discussion, because again, we can focus so much on the problems and the finances, and these are all very real things.
They are, yes.
But I mean, the church itself deals with these kind of things also. But
Yes.
when everything is said and done, and we've done all of our planning as a church or as a couple, in the end, we come together as the church and we celebrate the divine liturgy, and somehow remove ourselves from that mundane existence. And I think what you're saying here is that the marital relationship itself is, because it is a sacrament, is meant not simply to be lived in that mundane existence, but is to somehow be elevated and exalted in a much greater state.
Yes, absolutely right.
Okay, let's do this, Dr. Ford. So, I kind of alluded to this before when we started the show, and, we're not here to talk politics or anything like this, but the Orthodox Church has been extremely clear. All of the bishops have come forward with literally a unanimous voice, which is not always the case, sometimes in Orthodoxy, but we're speaking in this particular matter with absolutely one voice, and that is that marriage is defined as being between one man and one woman. And
Yes.
that's really rubbing some people the wrong way. They're saying, well, this is antiquated, this is patriarchal, that marriage is nothing more than sort of, indentured servitude to the woman. The man owns the woman. This kind of, I was reading some articles today about marriage, and it was sort of shocking to hear that marriage was being posited as an antiquated institution, a patriarchal institution that simply was for the subjugation of women. And as a lifelong Orthodox Christian, I've never understood it to be that.
Yes.
Ever.
Yes.
I've never heard that teaching. I've never seen it. So
It's a caricature. Yes.
It's unbelievable. Let's answer the question, please, will you please, for us. Why is marriage traditionally and historically understood to be between one man and one woman? Why is it that way?
Yes. There cannot be marriage between two men or two women because they can't have intercourse that can produce children. And without the reproduction of children, new souls meant for eternal union with Christ cannot be created. And without children, society itself cannot continue. And we can add so-called same-sex marriage is also impossible because same-sex sexual relations are not in alignment with how our Creator and Lord has fashioned us. We just need to look at how our bodies are made. The male body and the female body are designed and constructed by our Creator and Lord for becoming one flesh together, face to face. I really think it's to a large extent, it's as simple as that. And then, of course, yes, in addition...
No, please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Since it takes a man and a woman to make a child, it just makes total sense that it would also be God's pattern for children to be raised by a man and a woman, for every child to be raised by a mother and a father. And this is how it's been. This has been the standard for centuries, for millennia, in every society, up until our own time, very recently. Human nature has not changed. The needs of children have not changed. The way children are created has not changed, even though science, technology can bring about conception in other ways. But this doesn't mean that the central understanding of one man and one woman is to be changed.
Well, you've talked about the man and the woman, and that, that's understood. And I'll play devil's advocate a little bit here, because I've had this conversation many times with people, and the answer that I usually get is, well, the first thing they'll say is, well, not every couple can have children. What about couples that can't have children? Are you saying that they're not married?
No.
The argument usually goes like that. So, how would you respond to that? If you're saying, well, it takes a man and a woman to have a child, what about the couples that are childless or that they can't have children?
Well, in our Orthodox marriage service, there is much reference to having children. This is the expectation, but of course it's a fallen world. There is infertility, but this is an exception that, cannot be made into kind of a standard for some other approach to the sacrament of one man and one woman. Yeah.
I just ask one more thing, though. Then what about the idea of one man and one woman? Because believe it or not, now in society, we're facing that question pretty soon, right?
Yes, we
the
are.
idea of polyamory or polygamy or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know, but the idea of, if we say, look, it takes a man and a woman, they say, well, that's fine. Look at the Bible, where you had some of the patriarchs that had multiple wives. Let's go back to having, 2 wives or 3 wives or whatever it is. So how would you answer that?
Yes. Well, we do see some polygamy in the Old Testament. That's very true. But then we have the complete affirmation of one man and one woman in the New Testament, with Christ's affirmation of actually affirming Adam's words that the man will leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. There were only 2 human beings in the Garden of Eden, one man, one woman. And as we've alluded to already, only one man and only one woman can symbolize the union between the one bridegroom, Christ, and his one body and bride, the Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. So...
yeah, very interesting. And God is a jealous God, and he doesn't want, any other gods. That's right.
Absolutely.
All right. Dr. Ford, we're going to take a quick break here. 1-855-AF Radio. Stay tuned, because we're going to talk more about marriage and about the path to holiness, and about, how should wives be and how should husbands be, so that we can become holy and deified through marriage. Don't go away. We're with Dr. David Ford. We will be right back.
Father Tom will be back in a moment. In the meantime, the lines are open at 855-237-2346. Don't go away.
Are you struggling in your walk with Christ? Do you want to rediscover your reason for living, the person you were created to be? Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan gives you the keys to unlock areas of your life that hold you back from fully experiencing the renewal and transformation God has in mind for you. Co-authored by a priest and a psychologist, Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne Lowe, Renewing You combines principles of spiritual growth with psychological tools to help you become your best self, fully connected with God's purpose for you. To purchase this book, please go to store.ancientfaith.com. That's store.ancientfaith.com.
We're back with Ancient Faith Today and Father Tom Soroka. Give us a call at 855-237-2346. Here once again is Father Tom.
We are back with Dr. David Ford, and we're talking about marriage as a path to holiness. Dr. Ford, we had a question that came in through Instagram. This is more of a sort of a practical question before we get back to the unique role of the wife and the unique role of the husband. It's a fascinating question because, as you know, maybe even many of like at least my grandparents and great grandparents, it would certainly have been that was an arranged marriage. So the question that came in from Instagram was, should we marry and then learn to love our spouse, or should we first fall in love and then get married?
Wow. Yes. No, I think it's always, to grow in love, it's an infinite process. So, to whatever extent we begin that before we get married, we are called to grow in that love, even into the next life, as we've talked about. So to whatever extent that love begins before marriage, even in an arranged marriage, even if the man and the woman have never even seen each other before, I mean, they can learn to love one another, each other. So, and I think there is a lot to be said for at least women and men who are thinking about marriage to be involved with their parents and be open to suggestions. Why not? If the families are behind it, supportive of a certain relationship, that's a huge head start. I would say for people who are hoping to be married, that it's very important for their families to be involved with the process, along with prayer and patience and those kinds of things. So
I always like that. That's great advice. I always like that story that Father Hopko told. He told it on one of his podcasts, and he said something to the effect of, a girl had come up to him and said, Father, I'm thinking about marrying a man, but I don't know if it's the will of God. And it was about the will of God. I don't know if it's the will of God. And he said, well, do you like the guy? And she said, well, yeah. And he said, do you think you can live with him? And she said, oh yeah, I think so. And he said, do you want to get married to him? And he said, oh yeah, but I don't know if it's the will of God. He says, well, then get married, And I mean, it's like, sometimes it doesn't have to be lightning bolts and,
That's right.
some kind of, you can grow to love someone and to, yeah, absolutely. I always love that story, the way he tells it.
That's a great story. Yes.
Dr. Ford, we have a caller, Nathaniel, and he has a question for you. Nathaniel, welcome to Ancient Faith Today. You're on the phone with Dr. David Ford.
Good evening, Father, and good evening, Doctor.
Good evening.
So I come from a low church background, and I often see many of my friends and other acquaintances that are still in those traditions that experience a very high rate of divorce. And I've seen some stories of people that, later are coming into the church, and either they've been remarried outside of the church, or they're looking at wanting to be married again within the church. So I guess my question is, how can the church help them? I know the Roman Catholics have what they call an annulment process that kind of gives them finality of either gives them a breath of fresh air, or I guess kind of permanently cuts them off from the church if they don't give up on that idea. So what can the Orthodox Church do to help those individuals or come to better accept their past?
Interesting question.
Yes, there's always healing. We have the Sacrament of Confession, of course, which is so central. Whatever our pasts have been, if something from our past is proven to be an obstacle in our marriage, confession is such an avenue for healing. Is this Now, there is we understand pastorally that sometimes marriages do come apart, but you've brought up the Roman Catholic procedure
Right.
there. We really would see that as kind of an artificial, really kind of very unrealistic kind of fictional claim that this annulment process involves, that the relationship wasn't really a marriage all that time, and then what happens with the children? They would be considered illegitimate, to be technical,
Right.
So we don't have a process. We understand that a real marriage can fall apart. Very sadly, of course, divorce is an absolute last resort. We would really tremendously encourage the couple to make use of every possible avenue of healing and reconciliation.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
Sure.
I was just going to add there that, I'm sure, Nathaniel, that there is a difference in approach, as Dr. Ford is talking about, regarding Roman Catholic view of divorce and the Orthodox view of divorce. On the other hand, I think sometimes we ourselves either misunderstand or misrepresent our position, because, as Dr. Ford said, divorce is really never ideal. It's never really something that we are trying to seek. It's just a reality that happens, when all other avenues are already closed off. And again, one thing that I've heard, and I think it's a very good way of understanding this, because if let's say there's two people that are divorced and they want to get married again in the church, there's a separate service for that. It's not the regular Orthodox marriage service. It's a kind of a more repentant service, acknowledging, this situation here, but they're still married.
Yes.
And the idea is that the first marriage is the ideal marriage, and the second marriage is a kind of a concession, and the third marriage is like almost sin. It's about as close to sin as you can get. And I think we have to keep in mind, yes, there is remarriage in the Orthodox Church, but it is, taken with some sort of reservations and under the understanding that we still have to answer to God for all of this,
Yes. And there's also
Dr. Ford, anything else?
Well, just to add that in the next life, all of our relationships will be healed, so in ways we can't even imagine, So some people wonder, well, when we talk about marriage being eternal, which one will it be? We leave it to God to kind of bring the healing of all of our relationships.
Absolutely.
In the next life. Yes.
All right. Nathaniel, anything else?
No, that was all fantastic. I guess the kind of root of that question is, as you both are familiar, the Western view, especially in the low churches, is marriage is just really purely legal. So I think, some converts really struggle with the idea that marriages outside of the church counted, especially if they ended very shortly and typically awfully. So I guess that's kind of the root of that question. And the healing aspect of then getting a true shot at the proper understanding of marriage.
Yeah. Right.
So,
Yes.
Yeah, because it is a sacrament. Yeah, it is a sacrament.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Nathaniel.
Awesome.
Appreciate
Thank
it
you,
very
Father.
much.
Thank you, Doctor.
Sure. Thank you.
1-855-AF radio. Dr. Ford, we have another question that came in, and it is, can you share some advice or wisdom for couples where, and this is very common today, where one of the spouses is Orthodox and the other is non-Orthodox? Because obviously that can cause problems at certain times.
Yes, that is often a difficult situation. It's certainly not the ideal. To be united spiritually is so tremendously important. But people can make adjustments. They can adhere to all the aspects of their faith life that they do share in common, and honoring each one tremendously. But of course, I think there would also be the prayer that one day there really would come about the full unity in Holy Orthodoxy, and so that the couple would share the fullness of the Orthodox life together. But up until that happens, the marriage can still be very greatly blessed. There's no question about that.
Sure.
As each one, honors the other and gives freedom, maybe prayer, of course, patience, but moving together as best they can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen that many times where if the one spouse is very committed Orthodox Christian and the other spouse is, either committed to their own religion or is uncommitted, I think that Orthodox spouse plays a really important role because they can model those behaviors of true Christianity and true compassion for their spouse and so forth. And this, that this really can have a tremendous effect so that the non-Orthodox spouse, eventually might come around to the Orthodox faith and embrace it. So, all right, Dr. Ford, let's get through some of the sort of the nuts and bolts here, because we've talked about the idea of marriage being traditionally between one man and one woman. So from the standpoint of the theology of the church, of the service of the church, the marriage service of the Bible, what is the unique role of the wife? And how does that relate to feminine roles as an Orthodox Christian even today? Because again, we're not trying to delve into politics here, but it always seems like it's encroaching on our understanding, right? So because when we try to describe what's the unique role of the wife, you say, oh well, and you're saying, oh, it's patriarchy, and so forth. So what's the unique role of the wife, and what's the feminine roles of an Orthodox Christian woman today?
Well, I think the very first thing to be clear on is that absolute equality of nature that men and women very much share, this very same human nature, that this does not mean or imply that there should be an absolute sameness in their roles. If that had been God's design, he would have just created another man for Adam to be friends with, He created a woman. And again, just to look at our bodies, it's the woman who gives birth. It's the woman who breastfeeds the children, that tremendous nurturing aspect that a woman has, that she's born with, and the motherly instinct that she's born with. These are deeply implanted in our nature, as the fathers would say. And with this nurturing aspect of the wife, attentive to the needs of her husband and the children, supportive of them. Now, we also understand there are, of course, there's order in the universe. And so there is naturally order in the family, meant to be, with the headship of the husband. And the wife as second in command. St. John Chrysostom uses that phrase as household manager, usually. Queen of the house at the right hand of the husband, which is, of course, the place of honor. And of course, the wife has the example of the Theotokos, especially. All women especially have her as the premier example to follow. And as she says, be it unto me according to your will. But of course, this is a very important part of the role of the husband as well, to be the husband and wife being mutually supportive of one another. So there is an article by Frederica Matthews Green in the book I helped to edit, Glory and Honor. I would like to mention this article.
Let's do that. Sure.
Okay. Yeah, the high and holy calling of being a wife. In this article, she refers to a couple she knew who, when they got married, they vowed to each other that every day they would try to outserve the other. So,
wow.
Yes, isn't that a beautiful, beautiful mutual understanding
outserve
there?
One another.
Yes. But again,
that doesn't. Well, let me interrupt you here because
sure.
Again, when you talk about the headship of the husband, right away, sort of people will jump on that and say, "Wait a second, you're telling the man to be an ogre, and this is abuse, right? You're encouraging abuse." And what you're saying is, within the role of the man as the head of the house, he's actually to try to outserve his wife.
Yes. And part of that, yes,
I love it.
And part of that servanthood is to assume the responsibility for the ultimate responsibility for the general welfare of the family, the material, and especially the spiritual welfare of the family. And this is a role that's meant to be played with a great sense of servanthood, of self-sacrifice. This is in no way meant to be tyrannical, despotic. Again, St. John Chrysostom, he is aghast, that any husband would presume upon this role, which is really a self-sacrificial role, to dictate in a tyrannical way to his
very interesting
to his wife. Oh my goodness, yeah. He says, what kind of relationship will you have if it's based on fear? If the wife is afraid of her husband, my goodness, this is so antithetical to what true male headship is meant to be. And just because it's abused here and there, does not mean that the principle itself should be rejected. It's all
wonderful
about living it out in a truly Christian way. And of course, we have a parallel article by our dear Dr. Philip Mamalakis in the book Glory and Honor, the high and holy calling of being a husband. And he emphasizes there the husband needs to be checked in with his wife, with his children, always there as much as possible, with attentiveness, to them. But what makes all of it possible to love as Christ loves? It has to be with his help. And so he talks about the husband being checked in to Christ,
I love it.
And receiving the Lord's strength and guidance in helping him to fulfill his self-sacrificial role as head of the family.
I love that because it really blows that theory out of the water that Christianity somehow seeks for men to oppress women.
Oh, it's such,
and I don't think there's anything even remotely like that within the scriptures or certainly within the tradition.
That's right.
Dr. Ford, as we're coming to the close of the program here, I want to thank you very much. I do have one more question for you before we close, and it kind of goes to the question that we had from our listener on Facebook, on Instagram about love and marriage and so forth. So just like we had to define marriage, right? We had to define the idea of deification.
Yes.
The modern culture has a certain definition of love. And we know that, for instance, in Greek, there's so many different ways to define love.
Yes.
And I think our culture really focuses on this idea of eros, of the erotic sense of love, that love is a fulfillment of sexual desire. So can you help us understand what is the vision and understanding of love that Orthodox Christian couples should seek?
Well, first of all, eros does not necessarily just mean sexual desire. The church fathers talk about God having eros for us, his people, and about us having eros for God in grateful response to his eros for us. So eros is strong desire, and the crucial thing is how we orient this desire. For those who are unmarried, chastity is their God-given responsibility to contain their sexual desire, to control it, to hold it in reserve, so to speak, until their wedding night. This is the meaning of chastity for the unmarried, properly controlled eros and well-directed eros. And by the way, this word for chastity is sophrosini. It has connotations of wisdom, prudence, moderation, self-control.
Wow.
And so when it comes to marital chastity, this, for our Orthodox tradition, this is not abstinence from marital relations, but meaning only having sexual relations with one spouse and having dignity, decorum, and great tenderness during marital relations. I would like to mention Dr. Tim Petitis' amazingly wonderful book called The Ethics of Beauty. He talks very positively about chastity as properly directed eros. And he writes, eros requires chastity. And I like to use the phrase fire. The fire needs a fireplace, or else it can burn the house down. But when it's in that fireplace, then it can warm and bring cheer, right? So Dr. Tim says, eros requires chastity, or else it pours itself out in dissipation, leaving us trapped within ourselves. Chastity, he says, always means the forgetting of oneself and the discovery of the other. I love that.
Amazing.
When we devote this strong desire in God approved, God directed ways, then it's so fruitful.
Incredible. Dr. Ford, thank you so much for your knowledge and your wisdom and your wonderful perspective, which helps us understand marriage better, but also the idea that we actually, by fulfilling our marital roles, can become holy, can become filled with grace, can become deified, can become more like Christ.
Yes.
And the way that you put this and brought this out from the fathers is so beautiful, that we outdo one another by serving one another. I love that. That's really a beautiful, beautiful thought. Thank you so much. Thanks for all your work. Please
thank you,
tell Dr. Mary we missed her, and
Okay.
we're hoping someday she'll come on too, because I know she is your helpmeet and your
She
partner,
she sure
equal
is.
partner.
Yes.
She is a formidable scholar herself. So thank you very, very much. Thank you. Thanks
You're
for
welcome,
coming.
Father. Thank you.
Before I share a few final thoughts, I want to offer my sincere thanks again to Dr. David Ford for joining us tonight. Thanks to Matuszka Trudy for engineering the program, for everybody that listened in, for the callers, and those who submitted questions. Here's a few final thoughts. I love the part of the Orthodox wedding ceremony where we sing that beautiful prokimenon. It says, "Thou hast set upon their heads crowns of precious stones. They asked life of thee, and thou gavest it them." And that life is that life in Christ that is being given to that couple in the sacrament of marriage as we place those crowns on the heads of the couple. A lot of people don't know, but that's actually from Psalm 21. And I just wanted to read a few verses before we close tonight. And it says, "For you meet him with the blessings of goodness. You set a crown of pure gold upon his head. He asked life from you, and you gave it to him. Length of days forever and ever. His glory is great in your salvation. Honor and majesty you have placed upon him, for you have made him most blessed forever. You have made him exceedingly glad with your presence." And the beautiful thing about that psalm and the way that we express it in the marriage ceremony is we change him to them, because they are one flesh and yet they are two persons being united in Christ. So all of those blessings are given to that couple from Psalm 21 or Psalm 20 in the Orthodox Study Bible. So thank you very much for listening tonight. We welcome you back next week. That's our show for tonight. Remember to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Ancient Faith Today. Share out our program after that's posted. Give us your feedback. Contact us with any ideas or topics that you might want to hear about. Join us next Tuesday evening for another edition of Ancient Faith Today. Good night, everybody.
Giving the ancient faith a new voice. This is Ancient Faith Radio.
Saint Ignatius, 1st century Bishop of Antioch, called the God-bearer, is one of the earliest witnesses to the truth of Christ and the nature of the Christian life. Tradition tells us that as a small child, Ignatius was singled out by Jesus himself as an example of the childlike faith all Christians must possess. In Bearing God, Father Andrew Damick recounts the life of this great pastor, martyr, and saint, and interprets for the modern reader 5 major themes in the pastoral letters he wrote: martyrdom, salvation in Christ, the bishop, the unity of the church, and the Eucharist.
For Ignatius, martyrdom is really the fullness of Christian life, in a sense, which that can be challenging for us because, number one, he doesn't seem to have any reticence at all about going to martyrdom. Like, there's no sense of, well, this is what I have to do. You know, I wish I didn't have to, but this is God's will for me. He is going to it joyfully, gladly.
To find this book and others like it, you can go to store.ancientfaith.com. Again, that is store.ancientfaith.com.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm drinking my very last novelty that you gave me. Would you like to hear the quote on this
I would.
This tea bag. The quote on this tea bag is from Louisa May Alcott. And I feel like it's very fitting for the very last one. It says, "She is too fond of books, and it has turned her brain."
I like that.
It's a very appropriate Emma and Christina quote. So,
yeah.
Thank you for bringing me joy for how many months? Almost a whole year.
Yeah.
With little cute quotes on my tea bags.
You're welcome.
Yeah. What have you got?
I'm drinking water. I have water out of my Tervis Texas cup.
Yay!
So I guess I'm officially a Texan.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
Yeah, I actually got this for myself, which is like very surprising. But I was at Bed Bath & Beyond exchanging some wedding gifts that we like got duplicates of or like wasn't what we thought they were. And I saw it and I thought it was really cute. And I was like, I'm just going to get this for myself to remember when I lived in Texas, both in Dallas and in El Paso.
That is like so shocking on so many levels. A, you bought yourself something. B, it has Texas on it. And C, it was kind of sentimental. I'm so shocked.
Okay. To go back to A, I didn't really buy it for myself because I was exchanging wedding gifts.
Okay, that's right. Okay. I won't accuse you of spending money. Forgive me.
Oh, man. But yeah.
Anyway, I was going to say one of your goals in life is still to see how little you can spend on an item, like on the...
Yeah, I don't buy anything if it's in the double digits. Single digits only.
Single digits only. Oh, God bless. It's amazing.
Though I am gonna drop some buckets this weekend because Josh and I are going away for the weekend just to New Mexico, because basically he's like came home one day and felt super sorry for me because I just sit in this apartment all day teaching online. So he was like, we should just go somewhere, and like we're still gonna like do mostly outside things and be safe and whatnot. But there's a Trader Joe's. And I was just thinking the other day how upset I was that there's no Trader Joe's by us, because it's always especially nice during fasting periods to have a Trader Joe's nearby. So now I can stock up right before Advent. So Trader Joe's is one place where I will spend money.
That's true. I was missing having you around tonight because in addition to making tea, I was searching the house for chocolate, and sadly there's not a housemate who always hides a good bar of chocolate where the kids can't find it anymore. So I had to settle for a handful of chocolate chips. As you know, I sometimes stoop that low. It was very dissatisfying. I got to do something better before Advent starts.
I think of you every time I go to my chocolate stash in the pantry. Literally every time. Also, one of Josh came home from work one day and he was like, one of my coworkers was asking me if we have a Costco membership. And I was like, oh, like, no, like we don't really need to buy things in bulk. I was like, but tell him if he ever sees the dark chocolate covered almonds to buy them and I'll pay him back. And Josh was like, you don't even know this guy. And I was like, I know, but I want the almonds.
I always have to buy those in multiple bags to hand out to people who don't have Costco memberships.
They're so good.
They are so good. Okay, so what else is happening? Well, I don't even want to ask what else is happening in El Paso because I feel like the whole country knows what's happening in El Paso.
Yeah, I know. Literally every night my mom texts us like in capital letters, "You are on the national news." Okay, thank you, Mom. And then she just sends in all caps, "Joshua," and Josh is like, "It's not my fault." Like, it's like, so I don't go anywhere. I got into my car to go to the grocery store on Friday and realized I hadn't been in it since Sunday because the seat was still pulled all the way back from when Josh drove the car on Sunday. So yeah, I just sit here and crochet all day pretty much.
Are you getting good?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm making lots of like small things. I haven't embarked on a big project yet. I've been making trees, stars, and snowflakes to make Christmas garlands.
Oh, cute.
Yeah.
That's so fun. I can't wait to see it. That'll be awesome.
Yeah.
On the other side of Texas, we had a retreat. OCF had a retreat. I know.
How'd it go?
It was so cool. It was so good. I hope the students who attended thought it was awesome. We had almost 200 participants. About 70 to 80 of them were fully virtual, so just joining from wherever they were. And then the rest were all in little pods across the country at different parishes, including one here in Dallas. So it was a little group of, I think it was 8 students and me. We watched our keynote speaker on the Zoom call. It was great. Father Tim Hodnicki. I've never seen someone use PowerPoint so effectively. Like, it was funny. Like, that's not a word you use for someone's PowerPoint presentation. And then we got to like sit outside in the courtyard of the church and eat, and it was just such a blessing to like do something that might feel a little bit more normal.
It looked cool. I saw the pictures on social media, like that OCF was posting on Instagram, I think, of all the different groups or people all on Zoom together.
Yeah.
So it looked like it was a success.
Yeah, it was really great, and I hope it was a blessing to some. And we're working on whatever's going to be next. Hopefully, spring is going to look a little different. Maybe not in the world, but in OCF, we're going to maybe change some things up for the spring and working towards other opportunities for students to be safely in person and changing up what we're doing virtually. We got a big meeting about that this week, so I don't want to say too much. But next podcast, hopefully, I'll have some cool things to share that we're working on.
Yay!
Yeah,
that's exciting.
So in true, what movies do you do in a pandemic when there are no new movies? We're heading back to a classic tonight, or today.
Yeah, you hit the throwbacks.
Yeah. So today we're talking about The Breakfast Club, which I hadn't watched in a really long time. It's from 1980.